I'm Amanda. I never thought it would be me. I never thought I would be the one staring at a blank wall in the middle of the night, heart sinking, breath shallow, eyes burning. I never thought I would feel this kind of betrayal. Not me, not Amanda. I was trained for deception, trained to spot lies, trained to read body language, but he came in like a whisper, soft, silent, perfectly rehearsed. It started like nothing, a case that wasn't even mine, a bar I didn't even want to go to, a shift that had run too long, a drink I didn't finish, and then he appeared, tall, smile, warm eyes, just the right amount of scruff to look effortless. He said nothing at first, but he stood nearby long enough for my tired eyes to notice him, long enough for me to forget I was still in uniform, long enough for the weight of the day to make room for something I didn't know I needed. Introduced himself eventually, or maybe I asked, I can't remember. I just know that the name he gave me wasn't real. But I didn't know that then, back then, it was Mark. Simple name, simple man. He said he worked in logistics. I didn't press for details for once. I didn't want to think like a cop. I just wanted to feel like a woman, and he made that so easy. Looking back, I realize how perfect it all was, too perfect, like a dream scripted to fool someone exactly like me. But I fell hard, not all at once, but in slow, deliberate stages, like a staircase leading to a drop I never saw coming. He started showing up everywhere. At the coffee shop I liked outside the station when my shift ended with 2 cups of something hot and sweet, and exactly how I took it, he listened. That was the worst part. He listened to everything. He made space and silence. He nodded when I spoke. He remembered names, stories, my father's death, my mother's distance. He remembered it all and used it like a sculptor, molding my trust into something he could shatter. Told myself I deserved this, that maybe this was the beginning of something good, something real. After years of running into men with guns and knives and bruised egos, here was someone who didn't raise his voice, who didn't raise his hand, who didn't raise any red flags, at least none I could see, none I let myself see. Weeks turned into months. We weren't just seeing each other anymore. We were sleeping over, cooking, laughing, sharing accounts, sharing spaces, sharing secrets. Except mine were real and his were rehearsed. Except I gave everything and he gave nothing. But I didn't see it. I didn't want tummy. Friends were cautious. They asked the usual things. Where did you meet? What does he do? Have you run his name? And I laughed, told them I wasn't that paranoid, told them sometimes even cops deserve to fall in love without a background check. But I was wrong, so wrong. Proposed, simple ring, nothing extravagant, nothing flashy, just enough sparkle to reflect in my eyes when I said yes, because I did say yes, of course I did. He had become the home I thought I'd never have. He made me believe in warmth and mornings with coffee and late nights with wine. He made me think I was safe, and I wanted that lie so badly. I made it my truth. If only I had listened to my instincts, if only I had checked, if only I had been less of a woman in love and more of the cop I was trained to be. But hindsight is a cruel mirror, and at that time there was only him and the way he looked at me, like I was the only person in the world. And how could that be anything but really started leaving things at his place, a toothbrush, a jacket, my badge, once by mistake, and he laughed when I came back for it. He said it felt like we were already living together, and somehow that made me feel safe, like I belonged somewhere that didn't smell like gunpowder or coffee that had been reheated too many times. I stopped checking my phone for alerts during dinner. I stopped checking faces in crowds. I started thinking about the future, and for the first time in years it didn't scare me. He said he wanted to take me somewhere quiet for the weekend. I didn't ask where. I just packed a small bag and let him drive. We ended up in a cabin by the lake, the kind you only see in movies, the kind where mornings feel like whispers and nights are made of blankets and slow music and candlelight. It was perfect, too perfect now that I think about it. But back then I was lost in the way he looked at me over a mug of coffee, like I was the only thing worth waking up for. I was lost in the way he held my hand in silence, like there was nothing else in the world we needed to say. Told me he loved me under the stars. I said it back, not because I felt pressured, not because I wanted to believe it, but because I truly did. I loved him, or who I thought he was, and that was enough to make me forget every instinct that should have screamed at me to dig deeper, to ask questions, to protect myself from the exact kind of man I had sworn to hunt in my line of work. He introduced him to my mother. She was distant, cold, asked too few questions, and gave too few smiles, but I saw a softness in her eyes when he said he would take care of me. I saw something in her that I hadn't seen in years, maybe even approval, and I held on to that like a child clinging to a threadbare blanket that still smells like home. Never let me meet his family. He always had reasons: work, distance, illness, a sister going through a divorce, a father who didn't like cops. I believed it all. I didn't want to push him. I told myself that love is about patience, that we all have our timing and secrets and walls. I didn't know his walls were built to keep me out, not to keep me. Safi started noticing little things, not enough to sound alarms, but enough to echo in quiet moments. A call he would always take outside, a name that popped up on his phone that he said was a coworker, a locked drawer in his office that he said had client files. I brushed them off. I had seen worse in relationships, and I told myself not to be that paranoid cop girlfriend. I told myself to breathe, to trust, to love. Then one morning, he was gone, just gone. His clothes, his laptop, the spare key I had given him, even the framed photo we had taken by the lake, everything gone, like he had never been there, like he had never existed at all. The only thing left was the ring on the table and a note that said, "I'm sorry, Amanda, you deserve better." That was the first time I forgot how to stand, the first time my knees gave out without warning, and I found myself on the floor staring at that ring like it was a bullet still hot from being fired, and I was the one bleeding. He went to the station. I didn't say anything. I didn't file a report. I told them I was sick. I went home and sat on the bed we used to share and stared at the blank wall until the sun went down and came up and went down again, and still I didn't move, because somewhere in me I knew this wasn't just heartbreak, this wasn't just abandonment. This was something bigger, something darker, something colder than anything I had felt before. I didn't tell anyone what happened. I didn't tell my friends. I didn't tell my coworkers. I didn't tell my mother. I didn't even say it out loud to myself, because if I spoke it, it would become real, and I wasn't ready for that, not yet. I told myself maybe he had a reason, maybe there was danger, maybe something happened, maybe he was trying to protect me from something bigger than both of us. But deep down in the places I never looked, I knew it was all Ali. I searched everywhere. I searched online. I searched through our messages, our photos, our memories. I looked for any trace of the man I loved, and I found nothing. His name led to blank pages, his phone number disconnected, his social media gone, his email returned undelivered messages. Every trail turned to smoke, and all I had left were echoes and the sound of my own breath getting tighter in my chest. He started to question everything, every smile, every word, every kiss. Was it all part of the game? Was he laughing when I said I loved him? Was he waiting for the moment I would break so he could disappear without a trace? And if he could do that so easily, who else had he done it to? How many other women had fallen for that voice, that face, those eyes? I was a cop. I should have known. I should have seen it, and that shame sat inside me like poison. He didn't cry, not at first. I sat still and silent for hours, for days. I went to work. I filed reports. I trained rookies. I took statements. I wrote my signature like my hand wasn't even mine, and all the while my mind was replaying scenes like a broken tape over and over. The way he held me, the way he whispered my name, the way he promised forever with that same mouth that lied through every word. Oh, night, I opened my drawer and pulled out the file I had buried the day we got engaged, the one with his name, his ID, his background check that I had never finished because I told myself love was enough. I told myself I didn't need to investigate the man I planned to marry, but now I did. Now I had to, and what I found was the beginning of the end of who I used to bet. His name wasn't Mark. That was the first truth I uncovered. His real name was something else, a name linked to a trail of women across 3 states, a name that popped up in old police reports and fraud cases, in closed files marked with dust and neglect. I read the testimonies, and it felt like reading my own diary. Same words, same lies, same patterns. He was a ghost who lived inside identities that never belonged to him, and left behind women who couldn't forget the echo of his voice. Was good to good, the kind of liar who never blinked, the kind who knew how to mimic emotion like a mirror, the kind who could sit across from a detective and smile and pass every test because he believed his lies more than anyone else. I hated him for that, but more than that I hated myself for letting it happen, for letting him inside, for giving him the parts of me no one else had to shed. He wanted justice, but more than that I wanted silence, the kind of silence that comes after a scream, the kind that burns your throat because you swallowed the sound. I didn't want courtrooms or headlines or pity. I wanted him to feel what I felt. I wanted him to wake up one morning and realize everything he thought was real was gone. I wanted him to sit alone and feel the weight of absence like a blade pressed to his ribs. That was the night I stopped being the woman he left and started becoming the woman he should have feared. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just stood in front of the mirror and looked into my own eyes, and for the first time I didn't see Amanda the cop or Amanda the girlfriend. I saw Amanda the storm. I started collecting pieces not just of him but of myself, scattered fragments that he had broken without even touching. I opened every old file I could access. I used every tool I had as a cop, every system, every name search, every connection I had built over the years. I wasn't just trying to find him, I was trying to rebuild the map of who I was before him, because somewhere along the way I had lost that woman and I needed her back if I was ever going to destroy him. He found patterns in the chaos. He always chose women in positions of trust: nurses, teachers, social workers, women who were used to helping others, women who wouldn't run background checks because they saw the good first, women who gave the benefit of the doubt until it cost them everything. He was careful, never in the same city twice, never using the same ID, never making noise, just enough charm, just enough story, just enough lies to become what they needed. He found a woman in Ohio who had lost her house, another in Texas who lost her job, another in Florida who lost her mind. None of them got justice. They were ashamed like me, they blamed themselves like me, they stopped trusting like me, they stopped believing in love and people and warmth like me. And when I called them one by one, they all cried, not because I reminded them of him, but because I reminded them of who they used to be before he happened. He didn't tell them what I planned, they didn't ask, they didn't want details, they just said be careful, and I could hear the weight in their voices, the heaviness of hope and fear and something close to revenge. They wanted what I wanted, even if they didn't say it out loud. They wanted him to suffer, they wanted him to vanish the way he had made them vanish inside their own levesso. I built a new name, a new face, a new past. I used everything I had learned from every case, every undercover op, every file I had ever read. I became someone he would want, someone with a story just broken enough to be believable, someone just hopeful enough to be real. I created a woman he couldn't resist, and then I waited for the next place he would show up. It didn't take long. He had patterns and I had patience. I found a post online under a new name, but the same tone, the same language, a man looking for connection, for honesty, for love, his words carefully chosen, like always, like a hunter setting bait for a deer that doesn't know it's already bleeding. I replied with a different name, a different voice, but the same heartache he always searched for, and like a shadow slipping through cracks, he came. First message was simple, polite, warm, just like the first time he spoke to me. He didn't know he was talking to the woman he had left just months ago. He didn't recognize my face, didn't catch my rhythm, didn't feel the trap closing around him because I had erased Amanda so completely even I couldn't find her. When I looked in the mirror, he told me things I had heard before, same lies, new package. He said he was lonely, he said he worked in logistics again, he said his parents were gone, his sister was sick, his job kept him busy, but he always made time for the right person. And I smiled behind the screen, because every word he typed was another thread in the rope I was building around his neck. Asked for my number, I gave him one. He asked to meet, I said soon. I needed time. I wanted him hungry, desperate, eager. I wanted him to chase me because I knew what it felt like to be hunted, and now I needed to feel the opposite. I needed the power to tilt, I needed to control the gamma. I was calm, colder than I had ever been, but not empty. I was full of purpose, full of fire, full of something that didn't look like rage but felt heavier than hate. I didn't want to scream, I didn't want to break his bones. I wanted something deeper, something slower. I wanted him to fall in love with a ghost and then watch that ghost tear his world apart from the inside. He wanted to meet, and I said not yet. I said I needed time to trust. I told him I had been hurt before. I told him I was careful and slow and broken in ways I didn't want to explain, and he said all the right things again, like a script he had rehearsed too many times, like he didn't even need to think, just type, just charm, just press the right emotional keys, like I was a piano and he was a master. Every message he sent me was a mirror of the ones he had sent me months ago when I was Amanda, the real Amanda, the woman he vanished from without a sound, and now here was again watching him lie to me without knowing it was me on the other end, and somehow that hurt more than before, not because I loved him now, but because he didn't even remember me. I had loved a man who forgot me like a line in a movie he didn't like, told me he wanted something serious. He said I had kind eyes, that my smile made him feel calm, that he hadn't felt this kind of connection in a long time. He used words like fate and timing and trust, and I kept thinking how easy it was for him to say these things to me, none of them, and still make them sound true. If he had been a little smarter, a little sharper, he would have sensed something was off in my replies, something cold under the warmth, but he didn't. He was too used to women falling fast, and I had made sure to look like one of them. He created a job for my new identity. I made her a traveling nurse, soft voice, messy life, divorced, quiet, wounded. She had just enough trauma to explain her caution and just enough sweetness to make her believable. I gave her a dog, a dead brother, a past she never spoke about. I made her exactly the kind of woman who would trust a man like him. But slowly, so slowly, it would drive him crazy. He spoke every night, and I could hear the rhythm of him building a future that didn't exist. He talked about moving and about finding a quiet place by the water, about how tired he was of cities and noise and meaningless people, and I smiled through the ache because I remembered when he had said those same things to me and how I had believed them, and now I listened to them as if they were songs I used to love before I learned the lyrics were. Leash started to fall, or maybe he thought he did. It was hard to tell with men like him. Sometimes they don't even know what real feelings feel like. Sometimes they confuse control with love, obsession with connection. Sometimes they think they care, but all they really want is to own something that won't escape. And I could see the way he was starting to tighten his grip on this woman he thought was new and soft, and he let him talk, I let him plan, I let him believe. I gave him just enough truth to make the lies feel solid. I told him I didn't have many friends. I said I wasn't close to my family. I said I had made mistakes before and I just wanted peace now. I made myself small and quiet and perfect, and I watched him build his walls around me like he always did, and I waited for the moment he would start to ask for more, because they always ask for more. Men like him, they take and take and take, and then they take what they didn't even ask for because they think they deserve it, and I knew it was coming. I could feel it like the shift in the wind before a storm. I just had to wait long enough for him to step into the place where I could close the door behind him and lock it from the inside. He started to ask for little things that seemed harmless: a weekend visit, a few personal details, a photo I sent, a smile, and pixels, but I gave him what he wanted: carefully measured pieces of a puzzle that only looked complete from one side. I knew the moment he sent his own picture how easy it was to catch a man who thought himself invisible. I saved every message, every screenshot, every detail. I needed him to know that he was being watched without him ever seeing the eyes behind the screen. He built trust like a bricklayer, laying stones one by one, steady, slow, unbreakable. I never rushed, I never pushed. I let him come to me like a moth to a light. He was drawn by the warmth he thought he saw, but underneath was cold, calculating patience, waiting for the perfect time to strike. Created memories for us, memories he thought were real, but they were just echoes from my past, twisted to fit this new story. A beach walk, a dinner by candlelight, a night watching old movies with the sound turned low. I made him believe in us again, and in that belief he lowered his guard. His mask slipped in moments he thought were private, and I caught every slip, every lie, every crack in his facade. There was a night he got too confident, too careless. He left his phone unattended. A second was all I needed to find the hidden files, the fake passports, the bank accounts, the aliases that made him a ghost in every city, a shadow with no name. But the weight of his crimes was more than I expected more than just stolen identities and broken hearts. It was money laundering, drug trafficking, a world darker and deeper than I had imagined, and now I held the key to the cage he had built around himself. He didn't react, I didn't tell him, I just smiled behind the screen and kept weaving my web tighter. Every message, every call, every promise was a thread in the noose, and I knew soon I would pull it tight and watch him fall. I waited in the shadows for the right moment, the calm before the storm, when all the pieces were in place and the hunter became the prey. I wore my new face like armor, the mask of innocence wrapped around the cold steel beneath. I moved carefully, with the patience of 1,000 nights spent chasing criminals through alleys and back streets. Now I was chasing him, the man who had broken me, and I knew that this time the game was mine to win. Still didn't know who I really was, still thought I was just another lost soul looking for a safe harbor, but I was a storm waiting to explode. The calm before the chaos, the silence before the scream. I gathered every fragment of his past, every name, every lie, every secret, and I stitched them together into a net tight enough to catch a ghost, a phantom that had danced through my life, leaving scars. And Shadowsi watched his routines like a hawk circling above, waiting for the moment he let his guard down. I followed his movements, tracing his steps through cities like a shadow that could never be caught. I hacked into accounts, traced phone signals, used every trick in the book, because this was personal, not just another case, not just another arrest. This was my life, my soul, my fury made fleshy. Planned every move with military precision, every detail, every second was calculated. I created a network of allies, quiet shadows who knew the stakes, who understood the fire burning inside me. I wasn't just a cop anymore, I was a force of nature. A reckoning that was coming for him, slow, inevitable, merciless. He didn't want a public spectacle. I didn't want the flashing lights or the judge's gavel. I wanted him to feel the emptiness of erasure, the silence of disappearance. I wanted to be the ghost that haunted his nights, the shadow in his reflection, the wound that never healed. Lady started leaving subtle clues in his world, small reminders that the past was catching up, that the lies had teeth and claws. I made anonymous calls to banks, I sent hints to friends he didn't know. I planted seeds of doubt in the lives he built on sand. I watched as cracks appeared in his perfect facade, as paranoia crept into his nights and fear whispered in his dreams. Every day I felt the tide turning, every step he took was into the maze I had designed. Every breath he drew was one closer to the trap snapping shut around him, and I felt something I hadn't felt since he left. Not pain, not sorrow, but power, the raw, delicious power of control, of justice served on my terms. But this was only the beginning. The storm was gathering, and soon the silence would break, and when it did, there would be no escape, no mercy, no forgiveness, just the cold, hard truth laid bare under the unforgiving light of my vengeance. I watched him unravel from a distance, the confident man who once wore lies like a second skin, now twitching at shadows, ghosts of his own making. His phone calls became whispers, his steps grew cautious, his eyes darted to every stranger like he expected the past to walk through the door and drag him back to the darkness. He thought he escapade, planted evidence in places only he would notice, a receipt from a hotel he never mentioned, a photo from a city he said he never visited, a message from a number he claimed was inactive. I watched as doubt consumed him like a wildfire that no water could put out. The man who had burned others was now burning in his own flames. He didn't sleep, I didn't eat, I lived inside the plan, the web of lies and truths I had woven with my own hands. Every heartbeat was a drum, every breath a step closer to the finale. I didn't need anyone to understand, I didn't need anyone to see. This was my fight, my war, my reckoning, and I would see it through, even if it destroyed me. Then came the day I waited for, the knock on the door, the sound that would signal the end of the hunt, the moment he would realize the ghost was real and not just a memory. The day I watched him sit in silence with nothing left to hide behind, and I saw the man broken not by the law but by the weight of his own sins, and in that silence I found my voice, my victory, my peace. A bit even as I stood victorious, I knew this was only the beginning. The storm inside me was not yet spent, the fire of betrayal still burned fierce and deep, and I was ready for whatever came next, because I was no longer the woman he left, I was the storm he never saw coming. I watched him carefully, as if every movement could be a clue, every breath a confession. The man who once held my heart like a fragile glass was now just a shadow of himself, eyes hollow, hands trembling, voice cracking under the weight of the truth I had woven like a net around him, and the web was tightening with every passing day, until there was no space left for lies, no corner for escape, no refuge from the storm I had become. Me started to slip. He made mistakes, small ones at first, a forgotten password, a missed call, a hesitation in his carefully rehearsed stories, but those small cracks grew fast like fractures spreading through glass, and I was there to watch the shattering from the front row, the silent witness to his unwingy fed him just enough hope to keep him dancing on the edge of oblivion, just enough lies to keep the mask from falling too soon, and just enough fear to keep him looking over his shoulder every second of every day. I was the puppet master pulling strings with patience and precision, and he was the marionette tangled in his own deceit. This world began to collapse piece by piece. Old contacts disappeared, bank accounts froze, messages were intercepted, and secrets spilled out like poison into the dry soil of his life. I saw the desperation in his eyes, the flicker of panic when the past caught up with the present, and he realized the man who once hunted others was now the hunted. But this was not just about breaking him, it was about taking back what he stole from me, my dignity, my trust, my belief in love and safety. Every secret he thought buried was now a weapon pointed straight at his heart, and I wielded it without hesitation, without mercy, because some debts demanded to be paid in fully. Wasn't satisfied with his silence or his apologies or the shadows of remorse. I wanted him to feel the depth of the fall, the cold bite of betrayal, the emptiness that comes when everything you built is gone. I wanted him to understand that the woman he thought was fragile was in fact the storm that had been gathering beneath the surface all along. Every step I took was deliberate, every move calculated. I was not just a victim anymore, I was the architect of his ruin, the author of his downfall. And I relished the power that came with reclaiming my story, rewriting the ending in my own blood and tears. I watched as his facade crumbled completely. No more lies, no more masks, just a broken man exposed to the cold, harsh light of reality. He called me once in the dead of night, his voice trembling, asking for forgiveness, but I said nothing. I let the silence speak louder than any words could. I let the weight of everything crush him, because that was the justice I sought, the reckoning I deserved. He tried to run to shadows, but the net was closing too fast. Every safe place turned into a trap, every friend a stranger, and I was always one step behind, one step closer to the final act where he would stand alone, stripped of every illusion, every lie, and face the truth he so cruelly denied. He found the strength in the ruin, the power in the pain, the fire and the ashes, and I knew that this was not the end, but a new beginning, a chance to rise from the wreckage stronger, fiercer, more alive than ever before. Amanda was no longer just a name, she was a force, a warning, a story written in scars and vengeance. Seemed as the last piece of his empire fell into ruin, I felt the quiet victory settle in my bones, the kind that doesn't need applause or recognition, the kind that lives in the silence after the storm, the peace that comes from knowing I reclaimed my life from the man who tried to steal it. I never imagined that revenge would feel so empty yet so full at the same time, like swallowing bitter medicine that burns the throat but heals the wounds inside. I sat alone in the quiet apartment that had once been ours and ran my fingers over the cold surface of the ring I had worn for months, now discarded like a weight I didn't need anymore, and yet I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Not yet. The man who had stolen my trust, my heart, my future was gone, vanished like smoke slipping through my fingers, but the scars he left were etched deep inside me, invisible wounds that whispered in the silence, reminding me of the lies I swallowed, the nights I cried alone, and the pieces of myself I had to bury to survive. I found myself staring at the mirror late into the night, searching for the woman I used to be, the woman who laughed without fear, who trusted without doubt, who loved without hesitation, but she was buried under layers of pain and armor, and I wasn't sure if I could ever find her again, or if I even wanted to. Work became my refuge, my anchor to reality, the station, the familiar routines, the cases that reminded me that life moved on even when mine felt shattered. I buried myself in investigations, in paperwork In endless coffee and long nights that blurred into dawn because distraction was easier than facing the ghosts that lingered in every quiet moment, friends reached out cautiously, some afraid to say the wrong thing, others unsure if I was the same Amanda they once knew, but I let them in, slowly letting their voices fill the silence with something warm and real. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel completely alone. I started therapy at first reluctantly, but then with a hunger I hadn't expected, talking to someone who listened without judgment, who helped me untangle the mess inside, who gave me tools to rebuild instead of just survive. I realized that healing was not a straight line but a battle fought in small victories and painful setbacks, and through it all I discovered strength I didn't know I had, a resilience born not from innocence but from fire, the fire of betrayal, the fire of loss, the fire of reclaiming my own story on my own terms. And with every step I took away from the past, I felt a little more like myself again, a little more like the woman who refused to be broken. I began to understand that forgiveness was not a gift I owed him but a release I owed myself, that holding on to hate was like drinking poison and expecting him to die. I learned to let go piece by piece, not for him but for me, for the woman who wanted to live without fear, without anger, without the weight of his lies crushing her spirit. Started to rebuild relationships I had neglected, the friends who had stood by me even when I pushed them away, the family members who waited patiently for me to find my way back. I opened my heart slowly, cautiously, letting light seep into the cracks that had once been broken walls, and for the first time in years I allowed myself to hope. Work changed too. I shifted my focus from chasing ghosts to protecting the innocent from becoming prey. I used my story as a shield and a sword to teach others to see the signs, to trust their instincts, to fight back before it was too late. I became a voice for those who were silenced and a warning to those who thought they could hide behind. Listened. Then there was love, not the fragile, tentative kind, but the steady, enduring kind, the kind that grows from trust, respect, and truth, the kind that doesn't demand perfection but accepts scars as part of the story. I found it in small moments, in quiet smiles, in hands held without fear, and I realized that I was not defined by what he took from me but by what I chose to build from the ashes. I'm Amanda, and I survived, and I am still fighting, and I will keep fighting, because my story is not just about pain, it is about power, about resilience, about the storm that rises after the silence, the storm that no one sees coming but everyone feels, and that storm is me. The final act was coming like a tide. I couldn't stop a storm I had summoned with my own hands. I had tracked him to a city that smelled of rain and regret, a place where shadows clung to the walls and secrets hid behind closed doors. I knew this was where the last piece of the puzzle would fall into place, where the truth would be laid bare and the reckoning would begin. Moved silently through the streets, my badge tucked away, my new identity, my shield, the years of training and pain that had sharpened every instinct, every sense. I wasn't just a woman seeking justice, I was a force unleashed, a storm ready to break the calm. I had waited so long for the moment when he would stand alone and know that there was no escape, no salvation, no mercy. Found him in a small apartment cluttered with the remnants of a life built on lies, papers scattered, fake passports hidden under the mattress, bank statements with forged names and numbers. I watched as he realized the walls were closing. In the cage he had built was now his prison, and the ghost that haunted his nights was standing right in front of him. He tried to plead, to bargain, to lie, but the words fell flat, the mask shattered, and I saw the man behind it all, the coward, the liar, the thief who thought he could destroy me and disappear. But I was no longer that woman. I was the storm, the silence, the vengeance incarnate, and I held his gaze without fear, without hesitation. I laid out everything, the evidence, the stories, the pain, the broken lives he had left in his wake. I told him in my own voice, the one he thought he had silenced, that this was the end of the road, that his past was catching up and there was nowhere left to run. I watched as the weight of truth crushed him, the realization that the hunt was over and he was the prey. He sank to the floor like a man who had finally been unmasked, his pride stripped away, his lies exposed, and all that was left was the raw, naked truth. The man who thought he could play with lives and hearts now played by the rules he had so cruelly ignored. I stood over him, cold, steady, unyielding, and felt the last of the pain turn into something new, something fierce and freeing. Silence between us was thick with Everything left unsaid, the apologies that would never come, the justice that had finally arrived, the peace that was not a gift but a hard-fought victory. I reached for my phone, called the station, and whispered the code that meant the game was over, that the hunter had become the hunted, and this time there would be no escape. As the sirens echoed in the distance, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the chains of betrayal breaking free, and for the first time in a long time I breathed without hesitation, without fear, without looking back. I knew that this chapter was closed, that the storm had passed and a new dawn was rising in the shattered pieces of my past. I walked away from that apartment, into the light, into the future, the woman I was before, the lies and the pain and the loss, and the woman I had become, both entwined in a story of survival and strength, of revenge and redemption. I was Amanda, and I was free, and nothing could ever take that away from me again. Thanks for listening to my story with me. Don't forget to subscribe and follow for more stories.